This first reading for this morning comes from the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. And it's got a lot of challenging Old Testament names, so bear with me. And please forgive me if I muddle them. You practice them all you can. It's like your kids. You can still call them by the wrong name, so we'll see how we go. During the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. A man with his wife and 2 sons went from Bethlehem of Judah to dwell in the territory of Moab. The name of that man was Elimelech. The name of his wife was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They entered the territory of Moab and settled there. But Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. Then only she was left along with her 2 sons. They took wives for themselves, Moabite women. The name of the first was Orpah, and the name of the second was Ruth. And they lived there for about 10 years. But both of the sons, Mahlon and Chilion, also died. Only the woman was left without her 2 children, without her husband. And then she arose along with her daughters-in-law to return from the field of Moab, because while in the territory of Moab, she had heard that the Lord had paid attention to his people by providing food for them. She left the place where she had been, and her 2 daughter-in-laws went with her. They went along the road to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go, turn back each of you to the household of your mother. May the Lord deal faithfully with you just as you have done with the dead and with me. May the Lord provide for you so that you may find security, each woman in the household of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. But they replied to her, "No, instead we will return with you to your people." And Naomi replied, "Turn back, my daughters. Why would you go with me? Will there again be sons in my womb that they would be husbands for you? Turn back, my daughters. Go. I am too old for a husband. If I were to say that I have hope, even if I had a husband tonight, and even more if I were to bear sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you refrain from having a husband? No, my daughters, this is more bitter for me than for you, since the Lord's will has come out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth stayed with her. And Naomi said, "Look, your sister-in-law is returning to her people and to her gods. Turn back after your sister-in-law." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to abandon you, to turn back from following after you. Wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do this to me, and more so if even death separates me from you." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her about it. This ends the reading of the Old Testament. Now from Mark's Gospel, chapter 12, verses 28 through 34. One of the legal experts heard their dispute and saw how well Jesus answered them. He came over and asked them, "Which commandment is the most important of all?" And Jesus replied, "The most important one is, Israel, listen. Our God is the one Lord, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you will love your neighbor as yourself. And no other commandment is greater than these." The legal expert said to him, "Well said, teacher. You have truthfully said that God is one, and there is no other besides him. And to love God with all of the heart, a full understanding, and all of one's strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is much more important than all kinds of entirely burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he had answered with wisdom, he said to him, "You aren't far from God's kingdom." After that, no one dared to ask him any more questions. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Some of you may have heard of the book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. But for those of you that have not, I recommend it to everyone, whether you're single, dating, widowed, married, or anything in between that I might have missed. Sorry, technology just gave me a little pop-up. Okay, here we go. So, You gotta love that, right? So like any other language, these five love languages teach us how we can love and express love to others, and also kind of how we might feel it as well. So based on my experience, it seems that people have at least two of these five love languages in their life, but everyone is different. So I was first required to read this book as part of premarital counseling with Alyssa and I, going through that process with the pastor that we grew up in the church with. And so through doing this, I've gained a greater appreciation and understanding of this whole kind of weird to describe and really understand love thingy, right? So now if we took these five love languages and apply them to God, in a sense, we can kind of see how this can work for us and our relationship with God. Or more specifically, how we can express and show our love for God and to God. Not necessarily how God expresses it to us. Because frankly, I feel that giving the gift of life and life eternal are pretty big gifts and expressions of love. So not only that, but God does more beyond just that. But we'll chiefly focus on how we can express our love for God and through these five separate love languages that I'll describe and name here today. But before we begin with these breakdown of love languages, I want to kind of mention why I feel it is important that we talk about kind of this subject today. Some of you may have seen the post that I made on Facebook this week, denouncing hatred and uplifting love and how that is so important in the world today. For those of you that did not, or maybe struggle to see just how important love really is in the world, I'll recap a few of my main points from that post. A feeling for which I feel is very strong. So, first of all, the world just kind of needs more love, right? It's a tool that we can use to snuff out hatred and eradicate evil in some sense. A feeling of which I feel there is no place for in this world. I firmly refuse to believe that people are born to hate, right? I don't feel that's how people are made in this world. I believe it's a learned behavior. Meaning people have to learn it from somewhere. So that then places a responsibility on us as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, church members, or just members of a community. And so we at some point have to take responsibility. So as a result, we need to ensure that we overpower that hatred and find ways to teach, to exhibit, and to embody and show love in this world. So that being said, let us move back to the five love languages at hand and see how we can kind of understand those a little bit more and how we can use those as tools for the world. Now, the first and the perhaps most trickiest of these love languages to express to God is physical touch. It's not like Jesus is still around and we can hug him or give him a high five, right? So we've got to find different ways that we can express this to God and to other people. So if we go back to the concept that we are all made in the image of God, that's kind of, we draw that from Genesis, just different theology that's developed over the years. And then we have the understanding that we have God that resides in ourselves and in other people. Furthermore, I go back to what Christ said, and he said, "Whatever you do to the least of these, you also do unto me." So if we believe that every person is a child of God, every person is created by God, then essentially what we do to others is also what we do to God. So think of how you might have this perspective kind of altered through the course of time. But just think of every time you hug someone, every time you shake someone's hand or pat someone on the shoulder, then you're doing that to God as well. You're engaging in these acts of physical touch in a non-sexual manner. So to push this concept a little further, to help understand a lot of the research that's been done over the years, I'll highlight another post that was done by the preschool here at TPC. They had a post a few weeks ago about the importance of touch, especially when it comes to children. They said, based on this research, a child needs a minimum of 8 touches a day to feel connected to a parent. But if they're going through a particularly challenging time in their life, it's a minimum of 12 a day. It could be as simple as straightening their collar on their shirt, or putting on their socks and shoes, or a little pat on the shoulder or the head, or a simple hug. But basically, they need 8 of those interactions a day that are physical to feel connected to a parent or a loved one. So even the small and seemingly simple acts can go a long way towards showing that love to others and to God. So this is a great place to start. You just kind of start there. And in doing that, you express that love to God. The next love language also kind of falls in a similar vein, and it's physical touch, one of which, or both of these happen to be my actual two love languages. Typical guy, right? Just tell me I did a good job and give me a high five and you're good to go for a week. But one may wonder, how do we affirm God, the omnipotent, the omnipresent, the omniscient entity that seemingly has everything in life? Well, to do that, we could engage in more prayerful meditation throughout the day or week, or maybe be a little more intentional with it. We can actually offer up words of thanks to God for the blessings that we have in life, or verbalize those on a daily and regular basis. So in doing so, we might garner a greater appreciation for what we have as opposed to what we do not have. So another possibility is that we engage in healthy dialogue with others with matters pertaining to God, the Bible, and the church. It's okay to disagree, but we don't have to have the hatred that comes along with that, right? We can accept differences of opinion and still call each other brother and sister at the end of the day. So I'm sure that God generally feels loved anytime we discuss God or those matters in a healthy and loving environment. Those are ways that we can use words of affirmation to love God. And furthermore, taking what we have kind of learned from physical touch and applying that to other people, we can find that we can love God in that way too. And maybe we're more positive with the words that we use, more uplifting, more optimistic as opposed to degrading. Maybe we're a little more complimentary. Maybe we're more constructive than we are critical of other people. Maybe we're more forgiving than we are demanding. Or maybe we're more accepting than we are dismissive. So these are just a few ways in which we can healthily and safely express those words of affirmation to God. So that's 2 out of 3, right? 2? You staying with me? Yeah, paying attention? Okay. Let's make it sure. We got 2. Okay. So love language number 3, and in no particular order, mind you, I'm not ranking these, but I'm just going through these, is acts of service. And this is one that can be done relatively easily, especially through a church that offers many opportunities. We've got a gleaning coming up next Saturday. We fed the homeless for a week a few weeks ago, for a whole week, each day at a time. We have a food pantry. We have a mission team that goes and does the mission trips. And so there are many different ways that we can involve ourselves in acts of service to help the less fortunate, to selflessly sacrifice for the sake of other people. So anytime we go on those trips or go on those events and partake in those, we're enacting acts of service for God. So when we visit a person in the hospital or take someone to a doctor's visit, those are acts of service. When we clean up after doing it after others without mentioning it to anyone, or cooking behind the scenes, we engage in acts of service. That being said, they don't have to be strictly relegated to things within the walls of the church, or even just associated with church. We're all capable of doing acts of service for other people. But maybe we could help just gather the shopping carts at Publix one day and put them back where they belong, because they seem to get out of their cages quite often, to help the employee from having to do that one time during their day. Or maybe we buy someone's meal when we're getting lunch. Or maybe we engage in one of the other million types of acts of kindness that we can and are capable of doing in life. Again, doing these things for others result in doing an act of service for God. So all of these done in a loving way inject a lot more love into the world. And not only that, but it sets a great example for anyone that might be watching us. Our children, our friends, or a stranger on aisle 9. The love language number 4 is quality time. Again, when we struggle to find a physical representation of God, we might think to ourselves, well, how do we engage in quality time with God? I can't call Jesus up and go see a movie and go to dinner. I can't do certain things with him. So how do we engage that quality time with God? You see, maybe we go back to those spiritual disciplines I mentioned earlier. Ones that you might either practice or have heard of. Engaging in a nice meditation, various times throughout the day, engaging in prayer to ensure that we're focused on and acknowledge God and God's presence in our life. Or maybe we read the Bible a little more regularly, or at least once a month or once a year, right? A regular worship attendance also counts to remind us that we need to focus on God and make God a priority in our life, as is the case with spending quality time with anyone. You want them to feel like they're a priority in your life. That's at the essence of quality time. Besides, what better place to get quality time with God than just 1 hour every Sunday in God's house, in God's walls, right? What a great place to start. Again, even outside the church walls, we can engage in quality time with God. We can commune with nature, God's creation. We can take a hike. We can admire all of God's creation and relish in the wonderful world that God has given us. Maybe we spend a portion of our day listening to a Christian radio station or a podcast that's focused on God, positivity, or love and life. Also, exercise counts too. I'm sure God would say, take care of yourself and eat healthy and live a healthy life, where you only get one life on this planet. And I'm 100% positive God is fine with us taking time to care for ourselves. God loves us so much that He created us in the first place. Now, the fifth and final love language is the giving of gifts. So again, with stewardship season kind of upon us and almost past us, we need to be aware of how we can give those gifts, but how we also receive them in the first place. The Scripture reminds us that everything we have also belongs to God, and we're just giving back to God what God has given to us. In fact, the giving of gifts has been around since the early accounts of Scripture in Genesis. So in the past, particularly in the Old Testament, people would offer up sacrifices of creatures, or the first harvest that they produced would give that to the priest as a sacrifice and offering to God. And now, of course, we consolidate that to cash and finances, and with the occasional gift of food for the food pantries and various contributions that we can engage in the church and the community. But I'm serious when I state that the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, the word give is mentioned 1,400 times. And so it's clearly a priority for God in life, that we have the giving of gifts. So this gift, this love language is a little self-explanatory and easier to understand than the others, and kind of more or easier to relate to. But to me, this speaks of the various gifts that we have and the different ways that we can use them. Of course, financially, we can give of our financial resources and commit to giving to God in that way. But we can also give our time and our talents that God has given us and use them in a way that's appropriate and pleasing to God. A gift giving is a language that's easy to understand, but a little more challenging to accomplish and develop if you're not born with that or don't have that instilled in you at a young age. Some might even be born with that trait. Others need to intentionally practice it and develop it, to develop this giving and this generous heart, and that just comes through practice, practice, practice. So the reading we had from Ruth today clearly shows a couple of different love languages in that. I'm not sure if you could have picked up on those. But in this story alone, there's at least two that are kind of portrayed and expressed to Naomi. So it begins with the daughter-in-law saying that they would follow Naomi wherever she went and support her. That to me would qualify as an act of service. A pretty big, gigantic, long, lifelong act of service. Yet this could also fall under the giving of gifts too. Ruth is essentially saying, I'm yours and I will do what I can to support you, Naomi, as we are family now. And I give my life to you. So by that simple act, Ruth was devoting herself to Naomi in a way that covered two of the 5 love languages we discussed this morning. The reading from Mark's Gospel clearly places an emphasis on the fact that we should love God with all of our heart, with all of our being, and with all of our strength. And by doing that, our multiple love languages realize just how we can accomplish that feat. So granted, it will not be perfect all the time, but to Christ And to God, this is the most important commandment. And so we should make a concerted effort to make that a priority in our life by loving God and expressing love in those 5 different types of love languages, and maybe even more beyond that. But that's at least a starting point. But in closing, one of the toughest and most challenging aspects of love is that we cannot always 100% tell if it's working, right? We don't know if it's effective. Hatred, on the other hand, is clear indicators when that is present. Now, let me give you a couple examples. When the trial and crucifixion of Jesus took place, that was, again, evidence of hatred winning out. When a gunman enters and shoots up a synagogue, a school, or a nightclub, that is a definite marker of hatred and maliciousness. When people engage in fights or crimes or verbal vitriol, that is evidence that hatred is rampant. When the Holocaust took place, that was a clear indicator of the presence of evil and hatred in the world. So unfortunately, these acts are easy to detect and show the clear existence of animosity, disdain, hatred, and evil towards other people. The love, on the other hand, is difficult to always measure and quantify. Can we tell when someone's heart is warmed or it grows from showing them love, or those 8 physical touches that we give them on a daily basis during their childhood? Can we count the numerous tragedies and events that were avoided and averted from someone being loved, as opposed to being taught hatred or bullied in school? No, we cannot, unless there's a clear indicator of such, or you hear it straight from their mouth. Even as such, there's no foolproof way to know 100% that love is working. And nevertheless, that should not detract us and deter us from engaging in acts of love and partaking in those varied love languages. I can assure you that love does work. The world is in desperate need of a great amount of it. And think of how much love the world and God and other people should receive in life. Is there a certain amount? Is there a limit? Or whatever you think that limit might be, go past and beyond that limit. But then when you think everyone's reached their capacity for love, do even more. But we should go beyond what we feel is sufficient. Not only because it's tricky to gauge if love is succeeding, not because we feel it's the right thing to do, which of course it is, but because that is the greatest commandment that Jesus Christ has given us. To love the Lord your God, above all and above everything else. So what ways is that expressed? In many different ways, but especially through those 5 different love languages that we talked about today. So we need to love God. And we need to love others. And we express that love to God through our love of others. And in loving others, the world reduces the amount of possibilities of hatred and evil. And for that, we're all much better off. Amen.